So when I first became a chronicler, I made a video on blanking in I think the first week, and looking back at it now, it's so bad. I had no idea what I was doing as a video maker before. I'd never made videos before becoming a chronicler, so it was appalling to watch, and I really need to do a better one, realistically. So I'm going to do one now, because this is a very, very important part of playing GoTWiC, just generally, for the majority of the community, if you want to play the game at a high level, honestly. It really is such a fundamental part of being able to PvP at a high level. So there are, to my knowledge, unless I am dramatically missing something, 7 ways of blanking troops in the game. At least normally, like currently Treasure Seeker's going on, and you can blank through that as well, so arguably 8. But 7 throughout normal world map PvP. And they have varying degrees of effectiveness, actually. You won't want to do some ways of blanking compared to others if you have a choice. So first of all, the most safe way of blanking is Shelter. Shelter is the best way of doing it. You can now access it from the world map, which you never used to be able to do. You sort of could, because you could put 1 troop in your shelter up here and then access it through that, and just keep 1 troop in there, and you could keep accessing it up here. But now, even if you have nothing up there, you can just do it through more and then Shelter. So this gives no visual cue to an attacker, it doesn't break bubble, so this is by far the safest way of doing it. The second safest is fake rallying. You can just find the nearest camp, and then ideally, if you're full on blanking, you probably want to put your Lord here, just because you can unblank it in the safest way possible, which means during the unblank process you can then tank solos better, because you can bring your Shelter back and bring your fake rally back, and then maybe like 1 reinforcement march or something, and with your Lord stats back at home you should be able to tank some solos, assuming you're not dramatically overpowered by the accounts you're hiding from at the time. With fake rallies though, camps are 1, killable, and 2, have a time limit on them. So when this timer goes down, these will despawn for 5 minutes, and in that 5-minute time period you won't be able to fake rally at all, which is definitely something that comes into play quite a lot. And if you're playing really good players, like say there's 5 people and I'm fully blank, they could start 5 rallies on rebel camps near where I am, and then every time they kill one of these camps, they time a solo attack to hit me for that camp dying. So if I was hiding troops there, they would hit those troops immediately and potentially cap my Lord, because it is very common, like I said, to hide your Lords on these. So if possible, you'll want to fake rally something like as far away as possible, like this. That will be the most efficient way of doing it. But it can be awkward if you like tab somewhere and there's no camp immediately and you have to scroll a bit. It might slow the process down a bit, but it is the safest way of doing it, and there are just camps like everywhere on the map, right? You don't have to look very far to find one. After that, you have reinforcing and garrisoning teammates. The catch with this, at least with reinforcing, garrisoning has another very important part you have to play around, but they give fervor, right? So if you blank through this, it will, 1, unbubble you if you were bubbled in the first place, whereas fake rallies and some of the other ways won't unbubble you, but it also start fervor for 15 minutes, and then you won't be able to bubble for those 15 minutes, so you'll have to stay vulnerable for an extended period of time. But this is quite a safe way of doing it. You can use army size increases to hide larger amounts of troops, which is very nice. You will, however, have to be wary of where you're reinforcing and garrisoning. So if you're reinforcing or garrisoning a bubble, it's obviously totally fine. The enemies around you won't be able to interact with the bubble whatsoever. But if it's on a unbubbled castle, like here, it would probably be safe for me to reinforce someone like this because they're strong enough to tank solos, especially if you reinforce with like backline troops, if you know their front line or something. But if you garrison them, and this is very notable if someone sees you send 2 marches to the same person who's unbubbled, because they'll know you can't reinforce someone twice over. So if you send 2 reinforcement marches, they'll know one is a garrison. They can also check this just by attacking with like 1 troop, because if I attacked, do I have like this account with 1 troop and someone was garrisoning it, it would say on the report crushed, but then by the troops so and so stationed here, so you'll know there's a garrison there. And that really exposes your troops, especially if there's huge accounts around, like a max account that can tank solos on huge accounts. Garrisoning unbubbled people is very, very risky, especially if you do it on multiple people, especially if you do it on people who are totally blanked. But if you garrison someone like this, there will at least be the threat of, if someone solos that to hit the garrison, they'll probably lose their own lord in the attack itself, because after they break through your garrison, they'll hit their castle directly and just get totally destroyed. Whereas that obviously isn't present with if you garrison someone who has no troops at home. You totally lose all deterrent for the attacker in that situation, so you really have to be aware of doing that. So reinforce and garrison bubbles at will. That's one of the safest ways of blanking, especially if you have control over the bubble, like as an alt account, which you have open in the browser, and you can just follow it around. But if it's unbubbled people that you're fighting with at the time, look to reinforce, preferably, accounts that can tank solos. And if you're really at a push, you can garrison someone, but do it on someone which you know if someone attacks them, they will lose their lord in the process of killing your garrison. There's also joining your allies' rallies. Don't have any up right now, but that's quite a good way of blanking if you don't have access to bubbles. So you could like all reinforce each other according to the people that aren't getting rallied at the time, and then all start fake rallies. Maybe start like 4 or 5, be on voice together, and then you can all recall people at will or disband the rallies at will, and then disperse after you've blanked rallies through that. That's a very good way of doing it. Then the other 2, which are the 2 most risky, barring maybe the garrison tactic, is gathering nodes and occupy tiles. So occupy tiles, first of all, this is by far the last resort. You should never ever do this, because if you teleport into this spot as an attacker and then teleport off of it, this march would hit your castle directly. So if you blank like this, you will effectively just be suiciding against good players. I think one of my most watched videos is like, I think called Dancing an Invader off K21 or something, and it's basically that someone blanks by occupying tiles like this, and within 3 or 4 seconds I kill like 4 million troops or something just from teleports. Not even from attacks, I just teleport into the spot and then teleport to his next location, and I just repeat that like 4 times in a row and kill millions of troops. So you really don't want to be doing that. Gathering is an okay way of blanking. Obviously, there's problems with it. One, it will autofill the capacity, and you'll have to manually do an extra click to actually blank troops, really, because you can't just do auto select, because it will just go to capacity. Whereas if you do that for, say, even occupying tiles, it will just send your full march. So that's an extra step which will slow it down. But then when you hit the nodes, it will obviously be targetable. That's a problem. If you have further up, someone could speed in there, and then your troops will actually attack them and they'll be the defender. If you don't recall them, that's another thing you have to keep on top of. So ideally you're going to want to send to gatherers far away, just so they can't be targeted. So if I send here, it'll be an 11-minute march, obviously. The problem with that is then the enemies could like teleport here, send gatherers to this, and then use the instant gather skill, and coordinated groups will easily do this, and then recall your gatherers, and then if you're fully blank, my gatherer will come back, and then they'll all gangbang me when this re-arrives, and I'll be dead. So that's an issue, and the way you counterbalance that is you speed this up to, say, like a 2-minute march time, and then you recall it. Well, ideally, this is a bad example, you'd want to go past 15 minutes as a march time. So, is this far enough? Yeah, so you'd send this, and then speed it to like 2 minutes. I'm not going to waste the speeds to do this. But then you'd recall it, and after it's recalled, there is no way of enemies being able to interact with this, and if you go past the 15-minute mark, you should then be able to time out your own fervor from whatever attacking actions you are doing, and then you can bubble whilst these gathering marches are out. So that is how you'll want to blank using gathering nodes. They are a good way of doing it, but there are just a lot of extra steps compared to like joining fake rallies or garrisoning or reinforcing. Sometimes that's, if you're by yourself especially, this is like your only option, because you cannot do occupy tiles. It's just suicide. It has to be gathering nodes. But as you can imagine, especially if you have a lot of troops to blank, like the process of doing gather and then manually clicking up, I mean, you can reduce the process of finding new gathering sites by just clicking these coordinates to where your current ones are going to. But if you have a lot of troops to blank, you have to keep doing this, and then you've got to use so many march speeds to speed them up and then recall them, and really can't let yourself be caught out, because if you get caught out, you're gonna die. Yeah, and it's a method that really exposes your troops, and you have to keep on top of that very well to not get killed. So you're always going to want to start with shelter, always want to do a fake rally, ideally miles away from your castle so it won't be attacked, and then it's mostly according to situation and personal preference past that point, but you'll want to stick to mostly joining fake rallies of alliance members, or reinforcing and garrisoning bubbles, or reinforcing unbubbled accounts that won't be able to be soloed. Those are the primary ways you're going to want to blank. And in terms of account building for blanking, you are going to want to be very conscious of the number of troops you actually have, and know how many marches you're going to need to blank. So for me, I think I have 9 more troops right now. I can hide 1 mil in the shelter, and then I need, I think, 7 marches with a 50% march increase up to blank, which is a lot, so I'll need a fake rally, and then like 3 bubbles to reinforce and garrison, and then I'll be blank through that. And you'll have to know that, and then in the moment you'll want to basically prepare your escape plan if it all goes tits up, basically, because if you don't do that, you're going to panic when it does go wrong. Like if a max account teleports on me here, you need to have ran that situation through in your mind and figure out how you're going to deal with that, and then actually do so in practice. So for me, my escape plan here, it's a lot easier because there's nothing going on, and I'm just in my hive, but it will be 50% march increase, shelter, fake rally over here, click there, go back to my castle, and then full reinforce and garrison these 3 accounts. that's what I'd do. Yeah, in terms of troop numbers, there are a few different ways you can go about this. So there's a true zero castle, which will be shelter, and then fake rally, and then one march. The numbers you can run with this will be fairly low. Like for me, it's actually about 3.5 million troops, but I have very high army size and like a lot of paid content with the shelter capacity. You see that 600,000 from castle exteriors, which not everyone will have, especially free-to-play players, obviously. But if you're free-to-play, you can probably run like 2.7 mil troops doing this or something like that. And you should be able to preemptively blank in any situation and stay safe through that. Alternatively, you can set around like 5 to 6 mil troops and set your account up to be able to blank, but also tank and bait solos. So that you'll probably need shelter fake rally, and then maybe 4 actions of sending your troops out. So 2 bubbles, or 4 people to reinforce, or 1 bubble and 2 people to reinforce. Any set of iterations of that. If you're at like 6 mil troops, and then you get to the crazy levels of it where you're like a whale that's running 12 to 15 million troops, and you just have being able to blank as like a last resort of a 75% with all your marches and shelter. And you'll probably ideally want to get as many troops out as possible, so you might need like garrisons just to add more army size there. But that's on the real extreme end of things. So yeah, overall I'd say be conscious of your troop counts and build them specifically for how many marches you're comfortable with blanking when the pressure is on in the moment and it all goes wrong. Because that's, like, obviously everyone can empty their castles like right now because nothing's going on, but in the moment it's very different. Never blank by occupy tiling. It's suicide. Never ever do it. Plan your escape methods in the moment. Like even if you're teleporting, I don't know, like up here, and you want to hit this guy, in this specific situation it's not really necessary, but if it is necessary, you want to think like, if I get blockaded here, how do I blank? And in this situation you'll have no bubbles in range, so it'll have to be gatherers, so you'll have to like tab down here and then send there, speed up, recall, wait for your fervor to time out, and then bubble. That will be the thought process you'll have to go through. It doesn't have to be a really extensive thought process, but it can just be like an idle thought, and then when you get in the habit of it, you'll always know roughly what you'll have to do, or what you can do at least, to not die, which is the key. And yeah, I hope this can be helpful to some.